Good morning, everybody. This morning I'd like to start off by reading an email I received from Steve Drizzen about 3 years ago, which is both, somewhat depressing, but highly inspirational as well. For those of you who don't know who Steve Drizzen is, he's the main lawyer along with Nora Nyrider representing Brendan Dassey. And this was an email that he sent to me in response to one I sent to him, saying how disappointed we were that the Supreme Court of the United States, SCOTUS, had decided not to look at Brendan's case, despite the overwhelming case for it to look at Brendan's situation, not least 6 amicus curiae briefs that were presented. Anyway, he wrote to me, this was on 27th of June 2018. Thanks, Paul. I've been in this business long enough to know that the struggle for justice is a long game, not a short game. 10 years seems like a long time, and for Brendan it is. But many of the wrongful conviction cases we have been involved in have taken decades to unravel. I also know that dissents sometimes turn into majority opinions. People in power change. New advocates with new ideas emerge to bring new energy to the struggle. There are millions more people who now understand why children are more vulnerable to police pressure than adults, and why they are more prone to falsely confessing when pressured by police. And information and knowledge is power. Obviously, in Luke's case, there was no coerced confession. They tried, but he was steadfast in his innocence. Brendan, as with Luke, needs your support and the support of others now more than ever. Thanks again for your passion, and keep on keeping on. I need a wee break, but will emerge with renewed energy to continue the fight. As I say, somewhat depressing that the circumstances of that email, but also inspirational that, things do unravel. Not always as quickly as we would like. Sadly, I think even the greatest optimist is not going to suddenly think that Nicola Sturgeon is going to say, right, let Luke Mitchell out of prison right now. That is not how things work. And for the people that have looked, who are advocates for wrongful conviction cases, for the people involved in these wrongful convictions, I've been following, as I say, Making a Murderer since March of 2016. We don't wake up every morning thinking, how can we undermine both the police and local government, either in Wisconsin or here in Scotland? That is not what we're about. Indeed, the first time, believe it or not, that I have ever contacted a Scottish politician was last year, when I got in touch with both Callum Kerr and then Owen Thompson, and more recently, in the last couple of days, Christine Graham. Never before have I felt the need to get in touch with a politician, but there comes a point when you have to speak up and be heard. What I do know is that these wrongful conviction cases, such as Steve and Brendan and Luke, they do unfortunately polarize opinions. And sometimes they perhaps bring out the worst in both sides. Nobody can condone the graffiti because it can reflect badly on truthers. Of course, it would be fair to say, would it not? We don't know who sprayed the graffiti. But as it has been pointed out before, if you're going to create a banner, make something that's removable. By all means, hang it from the bridge over a motorway. There are lots of ways of raising concerns about the case and being seen to be supporting Luke without having to spray graffiti on buildings. I say removable banners would be would be far preferable. And ultimately, when you're following these cases, you have to deal with the guilters or the haters, as is often the case. As I say, these cases, they do polarize opinions, and they do, unfortunately, tend to bring out the worst in some people who simply cannot engage in a sensible debate. And unfortunately, as we have seen over the 5 years since Making a Murderer came out, as we've seen in so many other cases across the pond, and now we're seeing in the Luke Mitchell case, guilters, to use a quote from a famous film, it's like when Danny says to Withnail, "When do you let go of this ever-rising balloon?" The answer is they cannot. They start off, the guilters, by accusing the documentary of being biased. Let's have a look at that at a later date. I really want to do a separate video about that. But then, unfortunately, what happens is that the attacks will start to become personal. As I say, we've seen events unfold in Manitowoc over the last 5 years. And you get to deal with all kinds of guilters and haters. They hate Luke, but it's because the crime was so horrific. You've got a horrific crime. You've got somebody who authorities say this is the person, and so your hatred is directed at that person without questioning. And they get annoyed when their faith in his guilt is being questioned by anybody. They end up hating him even more, and anyone associated with him. As we've seen with Making a Murderer, they will try and do anything and everything to try and shut it down. As Kathleen Zellner famously said towards the end of series 2 of Making a Murderer, really all that Wisconsin wants is for her to please just go away and let Steven Avery die in prison quietly. That is what they want us to do with Luke Mitchell. But I would ask the question, why are the guilty journalists opposed to the search for the truth? What are they afraid of? The bottom line for me is, was Luke Mitchell convicted beyond a reasonable doubt? And we've got forensic experts. We've got Professor Alan Jameson, the head of the Forensic Institute, saying quite categorically, Luke Mitchell was not found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So please do, in your comments below, please tell me, what is it that they're afraid of? What is it that they don't want to happen? Why do they not want us to have this independent review of the case, similar to the Hillsborough disaster? Would be fair to point out that, as we've seen in Steven Avery's case, there are people, guilters, who say, yeah, we think he's guilty, but we agree with the fact that he deserves a new trial. So, I'm not labelling, as I say, it polarizes opinion, but you get all sorts of different people along that spectrum. And you do unfortunately get the extremes, but there is this common ground where you can be sure of Luke's guilt, you can be sure of his innocence. What's the best way of finding out? Let's have an independent review. We certainly don't want simply another Scottish court to rubber stamp a previous Scottish court decision. That's never going to get anywhere. And the question is never going to go away. The question is never going to be answered. Was Luke proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. As I say, forensic experts say no. We've also got in the documentary, we've got journalists, we've got defence lawyers, private investigators, criminologists, who all say no, he was not proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So as I say, question for popping in the comments: what is it they're afraid of? What have they got to hide? Okay, we'll catch you all again soon. Thanks very much for listening. Bye for now.